New soccer stadiums are sprouting up across the United States and are central to the soccer business and the growth of the game. In this episode, we dive deep into how new stadiums are created and the evolution of the American soccer venues. Our guest is architect Chris DeVolder, Senior Principal and Director of Sports, Recreation and Entertainment at HOK. Chris guides us through the history of American soccer stadiums and opens the door on the multi-layered process of creating them. So Chris, thanks very much indeed for joining the Soccer Business podcast. Before we dive into the issues and lots to talk about with stadiums, talk a little bit about your own personal journey and how you became involved in building soccer stadiums.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for having me, Simon. Gosh, it goes back to when I was a kid. So I grew up in St. Louis. Anyone that knows anything about St. Louis knows there's a deep soccer culture going all the way back to the 1950 World Cup and the U.S. team that beat England. And growing up, the only exposure on TV was a 1-hour show. I think it was an hour on Sundays called Soccer Made in Germany. That was on, I think, on PBS. So my friends and I, because there was a lot of us in the neighborhood, would gather around the TV and watch and just play. But then the passion really didn't grab a hold of me completely until I was in college. I was studying abroad in Italy. I was in Siena. The local team was in the promotion playoff, and that whole experience it changed my life around sports. So it goes back, 30 years to that point. So then in my career, because I've been doing sports architecture just over 30 years now, continuously looking for opportunities. In the early 90s, even the late 90s, there just weren't a lot of opportunities. And it literally started with a team we were working with, Simon, that they were playing in a minor league baseball park, and we helped them with some temporary seating adjustments. And then I think the next project was a university that wanted to do some work, and it's just grown and grown to where it is today. And now I'm focused 100% on developing soccer portfolio, and really for me it's about growing the game in the States. I think it's the one sport that has the easiest entry level for anybody. All you need is a ball. That's all you need, and passion.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about soccer stadiums, there's a phrase used in this country that you don't hear outside of this country, soccer-specific stadiums. I guess that phrase owes its origin to the fact that a lot of teams used to play in stadiums for other sports, NFL obviously being a big one. How do you think, when you look back on those early soccer-specific stadiums, I guess the Columbus Crew one was probably the first. Some people would argue that Lockhart in Fort Lauderdale sort of predates that perhaps, but I think Columbus Crew is regarded within MLS circles anyway as being the sort of first attempt to here's a soccer stadium. Some great games took place there. A lot of the DOS Zero.
The first one, right? Yeah, absolutely.
And, I've visited that stadium a number of times and have some affection for it. But I've also been to the new Columbus Crew Stadium, and you can certainly see the difference. Almost the journey is there to this point in Columbus, isn't it?
Yeah,
but
it is.
How would you describe those early stadiums and the evolution from them?
Yeah, I think Columbus was really kind of the keystone for what we do and what we're trying to do. And, kudos to ownership groups at that time. People forget now, I think, how perilous the league was in certain years at that point. And then you saw Dallas and Colorado build stadiums. And while they were for an MLS tenant, know that they also played a lot of American football in those. And then you started to see the groups like in Chicago and Salt Lake start to be a little more what I would call soccer specific, Simon, where you had a little more intimacy in the seating bowl. And then you jump forward to the last few projects, Nashville, Columbus, St. Louis, now New York. Trying to think of some of the other ones. Miami's under construction, and they've really gone all in. This is about soccer. We don't even call it soccer specific. It's the stadium of our club.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest architectural change that we've seen in the evolution is the introduction of the full canopies, roof canopies. That just
Yeah.
wasn't a thing in other sports here in the States. But I know we as an industry have taken a lot of inspiration from those stadiums in Europe and in England where climate really sort of forced the need for the roof canopies, but it's such a integral part of what we do now and the sport. And you and I have talked in the past about acoustics, and the addition of the roof makes all the difference in keeping those acoustics in. And you know, we're starting to see these soccer stadiums influence other facilities.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
American football, definitely, both in the collegiate and NFL, you're starting to see some roof canopies, maybe not full coverage, but you're starting to see those. And I think acoustics and you know, climate protection, whether you're in Buffalo where they're building a roof to help keep the snow out, or in Miami and now Jacksonville where they're building a roof to help keep the sun in the shade.
Yeah, because I mean it's a massive factor at both ends, isn't it, over here? But yeah, it wasn't always like that in Europe either. I grew up standing on open ends behind the goal, as they
Yeah.
were called, you know, and you'd get drenched, but also the noise would go up into the
Yeah.
sky. So
Yeah.
it's been an evolution there as well. I mean, the the key difference, I would guess, looking at it from my point of view anyway, having attended games for different sports, is I get the feeling that soccer fans want to be really on top of the action. Yeah. I mean, people say about England that that's the first thing that hits them when they go to a Premier League ground like Anfield or somewhere, is just how close you are to it all. Whereas I guess NFL fans have grown up, you know, just used to a certain distance. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so because you know, NFL is about how do we get 60, 70,000 people into a stadium because they can sell that number of tickets. And when you want to get that many people into it, it really drives what we're doing as far as the design of the seating bowl. So the lower seating bowl tends to be what we would call kind of flat, right? So that you're not building something that is so tall. And I was last time I was in England a couple months ago, I went to a Tottenham match, and you know it feels like an NFL stadium to
Yeah.
me more than it does any of the other stadiums I've been to in England. That same trip, I went to Brentford, I went to Chelsea, and just there's a big difference between those stadiums and Tottenham and the feel.
Yeah, it does. It has that scope to it, or that sort of feeling of space around it that you get in an NFL stadium. That it doesn't have that sort of intimacy that maybe soccer brings. Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah,
And I think there's even been some inspiration from some of the older basketball arenas, especially the collegiate basketball arenas, where you are right on the court. The seating is steep. You get some of the student ends that start to feel like the Cop in Dortmund, and some of those supporter stands. So the sports are learning from each other, Simon, in the design of the facilities, and especially for soccer. Selfishly, it's making our work better.
yeah, yeah. And I think there is a willingness from people I've talked to in the NFL and the NBA and the clubs involved in those sports, that they're actually they look at why the EPL works on television internationally. It's not just because the game is more easily transferable. There's something about that atmosphere, and I think when you look at other leagues, they don't have that necessarily. And part of it, I think, is the architecture. I spent a lot of time in Italy. When I watch Serie A on TV here, I don't pick up, apart from Juventus, who built basically a stadium for that purpose. Um, I don't pick up that same sort of atmosphere or intensity of the crowd being part of the broadcast. I mean, how much is broadcast part of the thinking when you're designing a stadium?
Oh, absolutely. And, I would say I agree with you. Some of the countries you watch, there you don't see the atmosphere. I personally think, Simon, that a big part of it is a lot of them play in stadiums that have running tracks.
Yeah,
So you're 40 feet at least back for the first row, as opposed to 10 to 11, 15 feet
Mm.
for the first row. But absolutely, to your question, broadcast is such an integral part of the design. Broadcast revenue drives everything in any sport. I don't care what sport it is. So we want to make sure that our designs are not just appropriate, but excel for the broadcast. We're getting the right angle for not just the main camera, but in MLS, even some of the other leagues, we're looking at 25, 30, 35 different potential camera locations
Mm.
within the stadium, and that's driven by how the leagues and the broadcasters want to show the match on TV, and I think that's a big part of the excitement. And you mentioned the EPL. I've been saying to folks that I personally think a big part of the growth in the U.S. is Saturday morning from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. We as Americans wake up on Saturday morning and we want to watch sports. Well, what sport is on Saturday morning when we're eating breakfast?
Mm.
It's English football, right? That's it. We have to wait till later in the morning, till noon, to watch baseball, American football, basketball. And I think the broadcasters have done a good job of really bringing that atmosphere that you talked about through on the broadcasts, so that when I'm watching, I'm watching Fulham play on Saturday morning, there's excitement around that.
Yeah, and you look at the MLS games. I mean, when I first came out here in 2007, there were still some teams playing in mixed stadiums. Um, it didn't always feel like a big event, even if there was a good crowd there. Now, I think you look at those new stadiums that we talked about. You watch a broadcast from a Nashville or a Columbus or a St. Louis, and it looks, it could be a Champions League game. I mean,
Yeah.
the way that you're looking at it. So clearly that element has gone in, and you can see. I mean, that's one of those things we sort of take for granted, isn't it, as viewers? Well, you probably don't, but most of us do. Is you watch games from the U.S. Open Cup or the USL when they put those streams on, and the camera's in the wrong place because it's showing you the empty part of the stadium, not the part where 4,000 people are packed into the one main stand, and it looks awful. Yeah, sometimes. I mean, it's that. I guess that's a reminder to people of what needs to be done. Yeah.
It, yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you. Although I would say on the positive side, we're seeing the growth of all the leagues as it relates to stadium development, and a part of that stadium development broadcast is hand in hand with that. It's not just MLS that's building specific stadiums. USL has a lot of projects underway, whether it's permanent or hybrid, modular. Even NWSL. I'm in Kansas City, and there's a lot of excitement around what the Kansas City Current did here with their specific stadium. And now here we are, just over a year later. Boston is doing a new stadium for their team. The new Denver franchise recently came out with imagery around their new stadium. So I fully believe, Simon, that with the growth of these leagues, you're seeing a parallel growth in the stadiums, and the stadiums are getting better, which means the broadcasts are going to be better.
Yeah, it is really interesting what's happening in USL. Almost every week in our newsletter, we're having, reporting that Greenville, South Carolina is building a 7,500 stadium, and people are doing these much, much smaller versions, which makes sense for their
Yeah.
markets and the level that they're playing at. But what kind of different factors come into play if you're asked to do, say, a USL League One 8,000 seater compared to like a full MLS 26,000 seater?
Yeah. I really don't think there's a whole lot of difference. It's really about creating, at the end of the day, what we're doing is creating the best experience for the fans and the players and the staff. And there are some, straightforward things. The seating bowl. Did we get that right? Do we get the lighting right? Do we get the broadcast right? Is the flow and the amenities, both for the fans and the players, correct? And whether it's like you said, whether it's 7,000 or 15,000 or 25,000, it's about implementing good design. And every client we've worked with across all the leagues, it's really also about, we don't want to build it too big day one.
Right.
Demand, and this goes true for any sport. Having less seats than there is demand is a good thing. It helps with the culture. It helps with the atmosphere. To your earlier point, it absolutely helps with the broadcast. Like you said, you don't really want to watch a match in any sport, not just soccer, where all you see is empty seats. You want to watch something, even if it's 5,000 seats, that it's full, because I think back to the NCAA championship, the men's championship. They didn't play at a big stadium, but it was full, and that atmosphere was really good, and you could feel it through the broadcast.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like choosing the right size, I mean, that must be quite a difficult decision for owners of clubs, because they're ambitious. They want to imagine the day when they might only be getting 6,000 in USL, but they're imagining the day that USL has this new Division One league, and they're playing on a big national TV game, and maybe there's 15,000 people there, and they're turning people away. It's a tough decision for them, isn't it? But how realistic is it? I was talking to the people in Cleveland who are looking at building a downtown stadium there mainly for their women's team, and they were saying that their way of building, and I think San Antonio did this with the way they did it. They built buildings smaller, but in a way that allows them to add, whether it be a second tier or a different stand behind the goal or whatever it is. How many people are tempted to go down that route, and how practical is it? Is it quite complicated to build a stadium that can be easily expandable?
I personally don't think so, just because that's part of what we're looking at every single day. But the key is, just like I tell people, just like financial planning. If you start correctly from day one, knowing that, hey, someday it might be 5 years, Simon, it might be 10 years. We want to be able to add 10,000 seats for a second deck or at the end zone. So if we start correctly and we're thinking about it ahead of time, if we're thinking about what we call day 2 and day 3 while we're designing for day 1, it does not have to be complicated. Whether that's leaving space so that you can come in and put columns and an upper deck, or in some cases, we've even designed the columns day 1 to be able to accommodate an expansion again, whether it's 5 years later or 10 years later.
Yeah.
But you make a good point about the owners have to make that decision. And there are enough of us in the industry that have the experience, have the expertise, not just on the design side, but the financial side, the market studies, the ticketing and hospitality consultants that can give the good owners the right data so that they make the smart decision.
Yeah, it's a good reminder of that, actually. How many people are sort of in the room at the planning stage when you're going through, like, you started with the blank sheet of paper, you've met with the owners and they've said what they'd like to have, but then you say, like, we talk about broadcasting, but we talk about ticketing. How soon do they come into the process? Just give us a feel of what that process is like, of going from the blank sheet of paper, as it were.
Sure. Yeah. The first meetings, it really depends on how the ownership group likes to work. I've been in meetings where it's as few as 5. I've also been in meetings where you could have 15 or 20 people, depending on the topic. And that'll kind of rotate through the process, Simon, where, let's say next Tuesday, we're talking about broadcast. Well, we're going to have the folks that specialize in that sort of operation, that sort of design. Could have, I don't know, I'm thinking about a recent meeting I was in, you could have 10 people. And then the following week, we may have a meeting specific to food and beverage. And some of the people are the same, but we're also bringing in additional folks that are specialists in food and beverage design and operation. And so, at the end of the day, I'm thinking about the St. Louis project. I don't know, maybe there were 100 people on the design side that were involved Now, we didn't have 100 people in the meetings with the client, but
Sure.
that's what it takes when you think about the architects, the engineers, all those other specialists. And it's fun. It's fun to get those folks involved. I always, even now, 30 years into this, I'm always looking for ways to learn from others. And those meetings can be really engaging.
Yeah. I mean, I guess from a fan's point of view, the issue that often rears its head, I think internationally, I don't think it's specific to the US, but when new stadiums come along, is how much of an emphasis is going to be on the corporate seating, the hospitality, the expensive, lucrative spots, and how much is on the hardcore supporters section. And it's interesting that in MLS there is this concept of the supporters section, which has its origins probably in the home ends and the cops of Liverpool and Dortmund and places.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just as European football in some ways is going away from that a little bit. How do you manage that particular? I mean, it doesn't always have to be a conflict, but there is something there, isn't there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, Gosh, every project that is a core tenet of what the owners want to see is that supporters end. And I mean, you mentioned Liverpool and Dortmund. That those are the benchmarks that everyone looks at. The inspiration of the big yellow cop. What can we do as designers and owners and operators to replicate that and keep it safe? And as I've traveled around and been able to go to matches in different countries, I'm always it's interesting to me how those supporters kind of operate, if you will. Here in the States, and I think it's because of the influences of so many cultures. You not only have the chants, but you also have the flags, you have the drums, and some matches you go to, you'll even have the horns playing. I think back to the 3 most recent matches I went to in England. You didn't have any of that.
No.
You had the chants. And I'm still intrigued by that because here in the States, you've got the capo, right? The capo stand, you've got essentially the cheerleaders. I didn't see that in England. No. So there's somebody that's orchestrating that. And it's really interesting to me how they know what cheer or what chant to do when. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's a conflict. At least on the supporters' ends, it adds that vibe, especially for a new team, I would say, where you don't have the history of 50, 60, 70 years where kids have grown up with their dad or these days their mom taking them to the match and they learn the songs from early on. So a part of what we have to do is working with the clients, help create that culture day one, that atmosphere day one. And I think those things offer that. And then, you mentioned hospitality. This is not me making it up. Just talking to owners, talking to revenue people. You've got naming rights of the stadium, which tends to be a bigger thing here in the States, although you're seeing that evolve in Europe. The jersey sponsorship is huge. And then ticketing, especially around hospitality, where we tend to see 20% or so is the premium seating of different, from very, very simple entry all the way up to the highest level VIP. But then even providing the general seating, those amenities, the food and beverage, the access to technology. We have to think about all those different things. And it can be a complex puzzle, but for me, that's part of what's fun about it.
Yeah. I mean, the fan who comes in the door, we were talking off air about the difference between English fans who don't necessarily expect to have like a full meal and an eat and drink experience at a stadium, whereas in America that's much part of the culture. And I've seen some great examples of it in MLS where Columbus Crew have a beer garden behind the Norddecker, their version of the Dortmund yellow wall. But an affordable sort of, relatively affordable place to eat a schnitzel and drink a beer before the game. And I thought that was a really cool way of doing it. People don't tend to do that so much in England. They'll do it outside the stadium. But in general, how does that compare not just to Europe but to American sports as well? I mean, I don't know. Is it pretty much similar, the expectations of a fan going in for an NFL game and a soccer game in terms of amenity?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. When you go to a game, when you go to a match, you want to have access, especially these days. Do I have access to fresh food that's maybe local? And is there a variety, not just pretzel, hot dog, hamburger, popcorn,
Right.
but the local hamburger restaurant or the local barbecue restaurant or even the local brewery. Do I have access to those sort of things? And
Mm.
just a wide variety of food. I remember the first match I went to in Toronto. It was the first time I had ever had a Scottish egg. I thought it was the most amazing thing I'd ever had. And it was, it was indicative to providing that local, that regional food that wasn't produced 400 miles away. It was produced right there, and absolutely fans are expecting to have access to that as a part of the larger experience.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, technology is something that people. It's one of those things that if you read a trade article about stadiums, people get really excited about the stadium of the future and the technology that's involved, and it's increasingly standard now to be able to arrive at a stadium and have like super high speed Wi-Fi. Um, the giant screen has become something that people either expect or aren't surprised by. Um, what else is there that we should be expecting coming down the line a little bit in the future? Do you think, or something that's unusual that's become essential in terms of tech in stadiums?
Yeah, you're seeing tech permeate every aspect of the design and the operation of these facilities, Simon. From it used to be when you get to the stadium, you have your ticket out, you have to go through the metal detector, right? And that's you just wait in lines. Well, technology has advanced so much that you have these walk-through detectors, and it's you can get where it was maybe 60 people an hour before, 100 people an hour. It's now up to 500, 6 people an hour. So
Yeah.
from when you get to the stadium before you're even in, all the way to your seat, and I can grab my phone, and because Wi-Fi is so prevalent and it's high-speed Wi-Fi, I can get the stats. That's one thing I've noticed too about matches over the years in England. There's one screen, and I might see a replay, and that's it. Where in the States, you expect to see replays, you expect to see every angle, and if it's not on the big screen, I can see it on my phone. I can track the stats all the way through, and I think the larger experience, because of the phone, it's a full day. Literally, I wake up in the morning and I've got a text or a note saying, "Good morning, Chris. We're excited to see you at the stadium today," all the way to when I get home that night after the match, and you get a text saying, "Thanks for coming. We value you being a fan and a ticket holder." To technology in food, where we in the States have finally taken notice of the way that beer is poured, especially in Europe, where they've got the quick fill,
Yeah.
and that was a necessity, right, of the laws. But fans here want it to be easy. They want it to be quick. So I think technology is responding to that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know what point you come in on the decision about where a stadium would be, or is that? I would imagine that's quite often already been decided by a land purchase before you come in. I don't know, but what are the trade offs between we see the suburban stadium out of town, um, and we see the downtown venues. Just talk about that issue a little bit, because there's always been a sort of assumption from a fan's perspective that downtown is better, but I don't know if that's always the case.
No, I personally think it is. You think it's an interesting question. Let's look at the two of them. So a suburban site, quite often it's on a site that hasn't been developed before. So not only are you developing the stadium infrastructure, you've got all the parking infrastructure. You've got all the utilities, the water, the gas, the electricity that you have to bring to that site. In many cases, you have to either provide roads or you have to upgrade roads, even in some cases, updating interchanges off of the highway. And it's very much car centric. So it's quite a load that those events put on the infrastructure. But you don't have the constraints from a design standpoint. You tend to have more land, so you can move that stadium around on the site. Where a downtown stadium like St. Louis, the one I've referenced before, there were a couple potential sites. So sometimes, to your point, we'll come on board, the site is set, we're just locating the stadium on the site. Sometimes we will help a client look at 3 or 4 sites. We've done that before, and put down a generic footprint and help them make that decision. But that downtown site, you're not having to build the parking lots. A lot of the infrastructure is already in place. The streets are there. Quite often, because it's downtown, you've got access to public transportation, whether it's buses, subways, light rail, and that actually is helpful. And I think from a fan experience, knowing that I don't have to drive every single time is helpful. I don't have to pay for parking because I can get on the subway and go. So I'm biased. I think an urban setting is always better, but there are there are pros and cons to both of them.
Yeah, and we're also starting to see a lot, especially I think in the smaller stadium space where it's part of a retail development. Yeah, I've seen some interesting debates online between people who are saying your stadium should be the destination, and the things around it are useful add-ons, and you don't want to end up in a position where you're like a bowling alley at the mall, as somebody put it to me. It's just a sports aspect of a shopping experience or something like that. I can't really think of many that actually meet that sort of description, really. But it does seem to be a trend, especially in the lower leagues where they're really looking to maximize the revenue to build. But even into Miami, the one they're building there, they're saying there's going to be a lot of retail elements around it and so on. Just explore that one for us a little bit.
Oh yeah, people think it's a new thing. It's really not.
Yeah.
We did the arena in Columbus many years ago, and that really started the whole district there. They've added the baseball stadium, the minor league ballpark that we did, and then, as you referenced earlier, Simon, the new MLS stadium there. But then all of the development around it. And I think we've seen it not work when you build the sports facility, whether it's a stadium or a ballpark or an arena, and everyone expects that will drive the business health of everything around it. And that's just not the case. Arenas are probably the best case where you could have, 200 nights a year where you've got an event, so you've got people constantly coming in there. Where some of these sports, American football especially, where you only have a handful of days a year, that's not gonna help those other types of businesses survive. So it really needs to be, sports is definitely, as a destination, is a help, but you need 7, 8, 10 different types of businesses in those districts for those to really thrive on a day-to-day basis. It's retail, food and beverage, office, residential, healthcare, public amenities, like a library or a post office. Really, the successful developments have all those different layers so that you have constant flow of people from multiple demographics, not just the Saturday soccer demographic. But it's exciting to see because they really feed off of each other, and it's a great example of 1 + 1 = 5.
Yeah, because it's often talked about a stadium, isn't it, when it's been sold, as it were, to the city, as this is a regeneration project.
Yeah,
as part
and it
of
can be. It can be. There's just something, Simon, about being next to a sports facility where developers they'll build around that district because they want to be a part of it. And even the stadium itself. Then I've worked on projects where people have gotten married at the stadium, at the arena, because they're such fans. Would people do that at an office building? I don't think so. There's something magical about the work that we do and how it attracts people.
No, they are magical places, stadiums, aren't they? People get very attached to them. Yeah, it's what we see constantly debates around public dollars. Cities getting involved in stadium construction, whether that's right or wrong, whether the taxpayers should be involved in these kind of decisions. Where is the sort of mood on that? Do you think? I mean, are people trying to avoid it if they can, or?
I don't think there's not a single answer to that, Simon. It really depends. We've worked on projects where our client has said, we're gonna foot the bill for this 100%. We're not going to get into that perception. But there are also projects where if it is a stadium, for example, that is going to be used for public events, for concerts, as an example, for farmers markets, for those sort of things, I think it can make a lot of sense. And public dollars can come in the form of different things. It could be actual dollars to help the capital improvement or the capital build. It could be updating the streets around the arena. So a lot of different ways to look at it. And yeah, there's not a single answer, but it's certainly top of mind. And you see people that will say no public dollars at all. And I think if they really did the research and understood an intentional way about doing it, they would support it. Although, there are always going to be people that will say no to certain things no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, in your job, getting to see how a stadium goes, I mean, it must be quite a satisfying feeling when you get to the end and you walk into a full stadium that you started with that blank sheet of paper on. What do people not really appreciate about the work that you guys do you think? Not understand, maybe, rather than not appreciate?
Yeah, it's like many businesses where where people will notice when something doesn't work.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And so I guess the answer to that question, Simon, is just the sheer number of people that are involved from the client side, from the design team side, from the construction side. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of people are involved in creating this typically once in a lifetime sort of project for that given area, for that given city. And just the sheer number of people, as I mentioned, but the hours, the days, the weeks, the months that go into it. One of the things I love about sports architecture is, the clients tend to have a sports background, and it's all about a goal. We're all a team. We're focused on this goal. And yeah, those events when the facility opens, there's always a little bit of nerves of, is everything going to go right? But it always goes well. It's a great event, and there's definitely satisfaction from all those late nights, all those tough conversations when you're trying to figure out something with deadlines. Yeah, it's a cool experience.
Yeah, and you get a reaction, I imagine, from the fans. I mean, what you've built them a home, effectively, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was out for a walk down here in South Florida, and there was a guy wearing a St. Louis City jersey was walking next to the beach where I was, and so I just, as I do when I see people in soccer jerseys, I said hi to the guy, and within 5 minutes we were talking about the team. He's like, "You've got to come to the stadium. It's great, the atmosphere," and and I was thinking, what a sense of satisfaction that must be, that maybe architects in other fields, don't get that feedback. If you design a museum, it maybe gets a couple of weeks of people writing about what a beautiful building it is, but it's
Right.
not a constant feedback every week from thousands of people, no?
Right. Yeah, you think about it. That's a great example, Simon. Museums, airports, sports facilities. I think you could say those are the front porch of any city.
Yeah.
And those are the types of buildings that get noticed. But yeah, anytime I'm anywhere and I see someone wearing a shirt that has the logo of a project I've worked on, uh, there's satisfaction there. And ultimately, if the project is one that the community as a whole enjoys, embraces, and uses, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. What are you working on at the moment that you can tell us about?
That I can tell you about. Um, yeah, we were talking before that if this was in a month or two, there's some really cool projects that we're getting started on. So maybe we'll circle back on that. New York City Football Club is under construction. They started construction in December. It's literally across the street from Shea Stadium, Citi Field.
Yeah.
And it'll be open for the 2027 season. So that's really the biggest one that we're working on, continuing to do some work for St. Louis at the MLS Stadium. And that's a key part is the day 2 and the day 3, as I mentioned earlier, understanding what adjustments can be made, what improvements can be made on our facilities. And then just being involved in the different leagues, talking to people, all the leagues, NWSL, USL, even the divisions within USL, collegiate, MLS. There's so many opportunities, and I think we're gonna see that continue past the World Cup next year. I think the World Cup really was the magnet that started it all. People wanted to do something to be in parallel with the World Cup, so they could say to their fans, "Look at these improvements." But I personally think we now see momentum that is self-sustaining. That it won't need a World Cup. It won't need a Messi to keep that momentum going forward.
It does feel like, I mean, the nice thing about doing the newsletter is it forces me to go and look at USL2 news from different clubs. And every week I'm putting that together, I'm like, what's happening in stadiums? And there's always something.
Always something.
Whether it's, Greenville Triumph in USL building a 7,500 stadium, or it's these groups coming together in places like Buffalo and Oklahoma City where they're creating these, somebody for soccer group or something that's got these plans. I mean,
Rhode Island, it's a neat stadium that they're just opening up. It used to be few and far between that you'd see those announcements. And like you said, when I read your newsletter, you've got something every week about a stadium project.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's incredible. So just putting your crystal ball gazing mind on, where will we be in sort of 10, 15 years, do you think? Do you think this trend continues and we have small soccer stadiums dotted across America in towns? Or where are we going with all this?
I do. And I think if you're a fan of soccer, especially of U.S. soccer, I think we're going to need that. I saw a map the other day of England, and it had the logos of every club. You couldn't see any of the background because it's so full of clubs. And you think about literally the thousands of players that are playing in the system over there, and how that can feed up through, the championship and then the Premier League and ultimately the national team. If we want to grow as a national team, that's what we're going to need. We're going to need hundreds and hundreds of clubs around this country, each with their own stadium. And for me, part of that is when you're a kid, if you're in the academy team and you're training, there's a physical, visual connection to someday, if I keep this experience and if I keep improving, I can play in that stadium there.
Yeah, that's so true. I think for young players looking at that, and that's where the dream takes place, right? That's where when I score the winning goal in the first team, that's where it's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Hey, that's been absolutely fascinating, Chris. Thanks so much for your time. I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Simon. Always fun to talk with you, and appreciate you allowing me to join you.
Cheers. Been a pleasure.